Mr. Chair, I just
Yes.
want to let you know at 9:30, I'm speaking in House Natural Resources.
Okay. How long do you think it'll be?
I think 20 minutes. Who am I guess?
Okay. Rebecca, join us. Okay, then. Good morning, everybody. We're going to start plowing through the remaining issues on H159. And I'm going to start with tips. One of the things I mentioned to the committee is that we just wanted to hear from Becky and Betsy just to triple check that there's nothing substantively new in this bill compared to what we favorably voted out of the Senate last year. And if there is, we need to just take a look at that and see if we're okay with it or not, or want to amend it. So I know you've gone through this a couple of times in this committee.
Yeah.
I thought the message was that it really is like dropped in from last year's bill.
Yeah, so Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. So this is primarily just the same language from last year. I think I would note that there's a difference in the number of projects that are allowed under this language versus last year, but that is, I think, the substantive difference from last year.
Can you point us to the page where that is?
Sure.
You
So
have a copy set up right down here, I think.
Page. It is on page 27 of the bill. At least, I think the bill, the latest version that I think I had.
3.1.
Oh.
And that's posted on our.
Is that for today? Okay, let me pull that up. Sorry, I looked for
I had it all marked up too. The tip section starts on page.
You have it, Becky?
Oh, I'm sorry, because it has a new bill number. So, okay.
Right. Are you have a page number for us?
Yeah, I did.
Another tip section.
I had it
Starts
all
on section 8 starts on page 21, but I don't know where that's.
It was 4 that it was changed to. Okay, so it is.
It's
starts on
page
page
16. It's
Yeah.
15, 16, somewhere in there.
But the number of projects is on
Begins on
20.
17.
In page 25, I do see that there is some language crossed out there. So this has page 25, lines 3 through 7 is the pilot program language. And it says that there's a total of not more than 4 projects. I believe it was 10 with not more than 3 per year.
We cut that back, I remember.
Yeah, and so now this version has 4 projects and
This is
not a limit per year.
Is this the project-based tips or the mini tips?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all.
So what passed the Senate was 10, and now we're cutting it down to 4.
It was, I believe it was 10 with not more than 3 per year.
That's what the language of that's changed here. And now it's just saying 4 total and 1 per.
In 1 year.
We had this discussion way back.
We did have a discussion. I'm thinking we had finance, so they might.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely cut it in finance.
Cut it finance.
But but when I went to the floor, we passed the finance version. So I'm just wondering if this is what passed the Senate. You're thinking that the Senate version that passed was larger?
It was 10. I thought we cut it back before it passed, but.
So it's 4 here. And it's a pilot. So that it makes.
Let Becky answer this.
So I have it up. So S33, which was the bill from last year, had 10 projects with not more than 3 per year.
Okay, so this is a substantive change.
When it got to the House, Commerce, I mean, they ended up taking out the pilot-based TIF projects from the bill. But as passed by the Senate, it was 10.
Maybe we changed
Maybe it was
it.
a conference committee.
Well, there was no conference committee. They didn't pass it in the House. But we may have, when we've talked about it, that we may have learned that where Ways and Means was going was small, because they came close to doing something. Are we okay with this?
As a pilot, I'm fine.
Better than nothing.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just when whoever reports this section, we just have to, it's easy to get up and say, we voted overwhelmingly for this exact version. Now they're gonna have to explain this one change. We could. All right, interesting, that's interesting. Okay, we'll leave it at 4. That's it. I guess, anything else in here? Because I had gotten an email, I think, from the head of Betsy. I think it said she wanted to see some changes, but maybe next year, I think she said, or maybe in the House, so.
Okay, I never
So
received
that,
any.
and she's not with us? Her name is, Abby Sherman?
She's right
Oh, she is. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I should mention, which I think was mentioned the last time I was in here, but I believe the industrial parks were added into this version. And it was something that I think maybe was in your version in Senate Economic Development, or at least discussed last year. But did not ultimately get into
S33.
S33, yeah.
What I was trying to do here is, we thought it was a really good program. I just wanted to drop it in without having to start relitigating it. So that's the one change I think we could, it would make some softer bill. Okay. Abby, thank you, Becky. I know you have to learn. Appreciate it. Abby, do you have anything you'd like to say to us on this TIP section at this point?
Good morning, Senator Sorokin. Abby Sherman, Executive Director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. I have a draft of the bill numbered 7.3 that I read through. And there are some additional.
Wait 1 second. I have the wrong version.
Yeah, she has 7 and she's on 263.
Okay, we need to get you.
It's 3.1.
We'll send you, why don't we do this? Thank you. Are you available in the next half hour to come back to us after you look at the new version?
Yes, sure.
Okay, why don't we send you the new version and the sections, and we're trying to vote this bill out today.
Okay.
Unless there's major things you have problems with, which I doubt there are, because I think we would have heard about them by now. There's tweaks.
A lot of it is just there's some duplicative information in here that doesn't need to be there, just some editing. And other than that, some additional language around brownfields so that it agrees with what is in S33 for the TIF clarification, TIF district clarification.
Let us send you the new version, and get back to Scott if you see anything more than small edits. Those edits can be fixed later on. So if there's a substantive thing you want to address, write Scott, so we'll get you back into the text. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So we have Joyce with us, right? Okay. Joyce, who else is with us? That's Scott
Damien.
Moore. Damien's with us?
Damien,
Hi, Joyce.
House
Good morning.
Morning,
Joyce.
Good
Morning.
morning, Joyce. Let's start with Joyce, because this is going to be probably most of our time this morning, is the breakout of the monies.
I'm sorry, do you want to start with the breakout of the spending, or do you want to start with the estimates for sick time and minimum wage?
I want the latter, sick time and minimum wage.
Okay, so good morning, Joyce Manchester with the Joint Fiscal Office. I think you have a printout of today's presentation. It should be dated March 16th.
You're way ahead of us, Joyce.
I don't think so. Okay, here we go. So in part one, I'm just doing an updated estimate of the cost of reimbursing the COVID-19 related sick time. And then if the committee would like, we can talk briefly about the minimum wage and how I cannot estimate anything at this point. But we'll see if we get there. Okay, so the COVID-19 related paid sick leave grant program has changed a little bit in that employers can now be reimbursed for either paid or unpaid sick time related to COVID-19. The maximum number of hours per employee is still 80, or the average hours worked in 2 weeks. The maximum hourly reimbursement has really dropped now to $25 as the maximum, or the greater of the minimum wage, and the normal hourly wage up to $25 per hour. Maximum reimbursement per employee, $2,000. And my updated preliminary estimate is incorrect on the slides. It should be almost $19 million.
But this 21 needs to be changed to 19.
Yes, yes. I'm a little bit worried that, okay, we'll see what happens when we go through. Okay, so let's see. I did a little magic with the distribution of wages as of May 2020. So we have the Occupational and Employment Wage Survey, and that shows us wages across Vermont at the 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90th percentiles. So for example, I know that as of 2020, we had 36% of Vermonters, wage and salary workers, at $25. And I was able to sort of guess about the 25th percentile and the 50th percentile and so forth. So the average reimbursement that I worked out for 2020 was about $20.35. But we know that wages have risen, and wages have risen more at the lower end of the wage spectrum than at the higher end. So that's why I make the adjustment to 2022 based on the increase in the employment cost index. And I get over to the right-hand column there where it says $21.42 might be about what we are reimbursing on average. Then I go on to slide 6, which says, but COVID-19 cases were more prevalent, have been more prevalent among lower wage workers. And so I knocked down that $21.42 to $20.50. So I'm assuming that the average amount of reimbursement under this program is going to be $20.50. So that says we've got lots of lower wage workers. We've got lots of higher wage workers that are capped at $25 per hour. And so then the average is something like $20.50. Okay, and then I
They're not getting reimbursed the full amount, only 67%, right?
oh, is it still 67%?
What?
It has been 67% since Damien tried to replicate the federal law.
Right.
I'm sorry. I did not realize that. That means that this estimate is going to be knocked down by about a third. So you may be happy about that.
Yes. I mean, yes and no.
Maybe.
Better for the budget, but not what we'd all ideally love.
And I mean, I like the $25 versus the 68, but even if we went back to the 68, that wouldn't bring up the full 1/3 because there's so few workers in the higher wage category, right?
Fewer.
So I didn't quite hear what you said at the end.
So, I mean, you were, you know, if now that we realize there's more money, if we went back to protect to a certain level the higher wage earners, which I'm not suggesting I'm in favor of, but we is Dayton with us, by the way? That would make up the difference of the third you just found, right? Because there's so few people over the $25.
So back when the maximum wage was $63.88, I was using $25 as the average wage,
Okay.
average hourly wage that would be reimbursed. So if we went back up to $25, that could be reimbursed on average, and then took 67%, we're down to what, $16.75, something like that.
It's a lot more. I'm not doing my math.
So,
Okay, so we'll, after we go through this, we'll take a break and you can redo the numbers just using the $25 and the 67%.
okay, yep, I
Let's
can
keep,
do that.
let's keep powering on with this, even though we know that it's at 100% in these charts.
Okay, and I did want to mention that I'm now using an average of 45% and 40% being reimbursed. I think with the lower reimbursement rate, and this could go even lower with 67% and a maximum of $25. So there may be some employers who think it's not quite worth it to apply for these grants if the reimbursement is low.
Sorry, I'm confused. I thought, we're talking about reimbursing at 67%. What's the 40 and 45?
So this is of the COVID cases. We've got about 62,000 cases. And I'm assuming that not all of those will be at employers, and not all the employers who have COVID cases will bother to apply for the.
Got it. So you're estimating 45% of employers will apply?
Or 40%. You can see in the lower part of the chart here, I've got both 45% and 40%.
And just, can you remind me how many employers applied for the hazard pay or the stuff we did before through them?
Right, so there was a lot of cajoling of employers by the state in order to get the really big employers to apply for the hazard pay.
Right, I remember Michael was.
Right.
So, and
Right.
what was the uptick? Remind me on that.
Oh, I don't know what the final was. Anyway.
We had testimony from Mike. Beach on that.
Right,
I asked
and
him
I can't
that question. He thought we got mostly all the people.
All the big,
It was
all the
huge.
big ones.
Yeah,
But we have another problem here, and that some of these cases are associated with people who are not employees, right? Many of them are older people.
right,
And
right, you're right.
They're caretakers, employees, or are they not working or what? So anyway, there's a lot more squishiness, I think.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. So
Yeah. So what I'm really thinking about is if the maximum amount reimbursed is $25 and it's only 67% of the $25, will employers, for the most part, bother to apply? And maybe the answer is yes, but I just don't know. So I'm trying to put in a little.
Now that we have some extra money, we could be more generous with administratives and outreach support with that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm depending, or I think we're hoping that the employees themselves will put pressure on their employers to say, this is money for us, it doesn't cost you anything. So I mean,
Right.
there is a small administrative burden, but that's the question. I don't know why an employer, if they were aware of it and they had reimbursement for administrative costs, why they wouldn't help their workers. So I think
So
there'd be some for sure.
Yeah, but the key is people knowing about it.
Right.
You're right, both sides of the fence.
So I don't understand that, because the people with paid sick leave have already been paid for those hours, right? It's only the people with unpaid sick leave who might get reimbursed by the employer retroactively.
I think there's a fair number of those.
There could be, but it's
If we do
Yeah.
that,
right. So it's not the majority, but it could be a significant number. Yeah. Okay, are we good?
Well, I don't know, that's a stretch.
Right. I mean, there's so much uncertainty here. And as I've said several times before, if there's another COVID spike, these numbers go much, much higher. And I think maybe there needs to be something in the legislation that says that the program would cease after the funds are gone or something like this, because who knows what might happen.
well, maybe now that we know we have, well, we'll get to the overall budgeting of this bill, but now that we know they have an extra $5 million or something like that. Maybe we just be a little generous and cushion. I mean, it's gonna, and if it's more, we'll have language that reverts back to the ARPA. Yeah.
I wonder if it makes sense to establish some means of notifying employers, such as information on unemployment notices or information on documents that the state unemployment sends to employers on a regular basis, flyers,
Absolutely.
website.
Yeah, absolutely. When Mike Pichak was in, it was amazing to hear him. He said this program was done without any added administrative costs. I didn't ask for any extra money. That pools of volunteers who helped.
Yes,
And
that
he
was
said,
astonishing.
they were able to do the regular work and still get this done in an effective way. In this case, we may want to put some, just as, belts and suspenders, put a little extra money into, and say you can use it for hours.
Employers who aren't going to know about it, and I don't think you can depend on employees to get their employers to act.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, this bill this is as much to reimburse employers who have paid extra money and done the right thing, and also to those employers. And when the focus of this started out was people who were going home from work and not having any income replacement, and trying to get those people. So, and now let's keep moving on, and we'll come back with an adjusted slide later this morning.
Sure. So I did want to note that we don't have any administrative costs included, but it's certainly true that reducing the cost of the program itself might free up some money for that. Okay, so that's the end of my talk on the paid sick time. Would you like to hear about minimum wage and how I can't figure out much of anything?
Let's do that quickly one more time. We've done it before.
Right, so you'll see on slide 9, I show you both the nominal increase that has already happened in 2021, 2022. So we're now up to $12.55. So that nominal increase was 7.2% last year, 6.8% this year. But once you adjust for inflation, those increases are not so impressive. So adjusting for inflation, I've done it 2 ways here, but I prefer the average of T and T minus 1 in the next to the most right column. So it's an increase of 4.3% adjusted for inflation in 2021 and just 2.4% adjusted for inflation in 2022. And then if we look going forward at the $13.75 and the $15 in 2023 and 2024, those are big jumps in nominal terms and in current dollar terms, 9.6% and 9.1%. But I'm guessing that the consensus forecast is very much understating inflation for this year and maybe for next year. And so those numbers on the right-hand side, in the 5.9%, 6.1%, those are probably going to come down quite a bit by the time we take account of actual inflation this year and next year. So in fact, the real or inflation-adjusted increases won't be so big when we move up to $13.75 and $15. So that just says that the economic effects, the effects on the labor markets and the economy in general, will not be as big as previously the jumps in 2021 and 2022.
Is there anywhere in here where you could show, I mean, I guess if we didn't change the law, the inflationary increase would be the numbers in the middle column, like next year it would go up from 12.55 and go up to 6.0%.
Yeah, so the slightly tricky part there is that the inflation adjustment is based on a year ago. So it's let's see, it's September through August as of the next January. So in fact, there'll be a little bit of a lag in the adjustment to the minimum wage each January, but eventually it will catch up with actual inflation.
Could you, when you do the adjustment and come back with new slides later this morning on the first issue, can you just put a column of what you predict the minimum wage to be in Vermont, if it's just subject to inflation of 5%, whichever is smaller? Existing
Yeah,
law?
so you can see the inflation projections in the most left column there. Those are the consensus projections as of this January. I'm saying that those are probably too low, and they could bump up.
Well, that's the inflation projection, the left column. Can you just
Yes.
translate it in that to nominal dollar amounts after 1255 for the last 3 years? So
Yes, I have that on a spreadsheet, so I can easily do that. Yeah.
So, wow, so, okay. Got it. Okay. And the
Yeah,
next,
the tricky part is guesstimating what inflation will actually look like going forward. Yeah.
You don't have a crystal ball, Joyce?
If I did.
Pay for that with COVID funds?
Yeah, exactly. Can we get one with COVID funds, says Randy?
Right. Right. So slide 10 is simply thinking about the labor market and economic effects. And of course, we don't have any current data on wages. The most recent report for Vermont comes from May 2020, which seems like a very long time ago now. So the current labor market and inflation conditions are both rather extraordinary, and they both push in the direction of smaller negative impacts on the economy. So you can see down at the bottom in this chart here, I've used the employment cost index for all of the US to show what wage increases have been as of December of 2021. And you can see that for everyone in private industry, wages have gone up about 4.4%. But in accommodation and food services, the annual rate of increase has been 8.1% as of December. And for nursing and residential care facilities, 5.8%. So clearly there's a lot of pressure to attract and keep workers in those two industries, and probably across the board in lower paid jobs.
so this is all of the column on the right is all of calendar year 2021.
Correct, yes.
And how does that compare with inflation for 2021? It's higher, right?
Oh yeah, it's higher. So nationwide inflation for 2021, I think, was 4.7%. But you can see that especially among those particular sectors, accommodation, food services, and nursing, residential care, the pressure has been much greater, in part because people are not wanting to work in those jobs, right? And it's exposure to the public, and lots of those folks have caregiving responsibilities, et cetera. So it's been really hard to keep workers in those sectors.
Is this, okay, but this is all people in those sectors. It's not just minimum wage workers.
Correct, absolutely correct. Yes.
Signs all over the place, paying $18 and whatever. And so I would assume that this 4.4% that is for all private industry, which is a little bit higher, or maybe equal to inflation, would be much higher if you just look at people at the low end of the.
Absolutely. Yeah. The problem is we don't have that data, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's why I looked at those particular sectors, because more of the workers in those sectors would be either low wage or in the healthcare sector. Of course, there's huge demand across the board. So. Okay, so generally speaking, on slide 11, I'm just trying to qualitatively think about effects of raising the minimum wage. And as I said, all of these effects will be muted to some extent because inflation is pushing wages higher anyway. So it is true that some low-paid workers will receive an increased wage as the minimum wage goes up. And those workers are often less educated, older women, and teenagers. Vermont will see some small increase in tax revenues and some reduction in benefit payments as wages go up at the low end. We'll also see some reduction in federal funds because fewer people will qualify for some of the federal programs that are based on wages and income. Relatively small number of jobs will likely disappear. Maybe the mom and pop general stores can't afford to pay the $15 an hour or whatever, but again, who knows what will happen with inflation, so maybe that's much less of a problem. And in the long term, the number of jobs will be a bit lower. The level of GDP will also be just a bit lower.
Just one last question on this. I remember when we did the ones before, we had a lot of charts. I don't know if it was from you or Tom Cavett that showed the amount of increase in terms of the amount of workers that would be affected and how much more money they would get, how many jobs would be lost. And, you know, is that something that we can replicate 2 years later at this point?
No, and you'll actually see if you go on to slide 13 and 14, I showed those charts from the previous fiscal note. So you can remind yourself of what we had done back there.
There they are.
Yeah, so the issue is that those were all based on a survey, which at the time was 2 years old, but that wasn't so bad because the economy hadn't changed that much. Right now, the economy has changed so much from 2019, 2020, that it would be silly for us to do these calculations and think that they are at all accurate. So Tom and I agree that it's just not sensible to try to put these numbers on the page, except to note that the effects will likely be smaller than what we found back in 2020.
Okay, so why don't you revise the charts, send them to Scott, and we'll be in touch as to whether we need to have you back or not this morning. I appreciate all your work on this. It's great.
Very good, thank you.
Now, my understanding is that in your estimates, you did not include solo practitioners and
Sole proprietors, right?
proprietors.
Did not, right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I think the bill was crafted, and that would be another administrative level to do that.
Right.
To pay those people. So, okay, good. We'll be back in touch.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you.
very much. We'll get back to
Damien's still going through House General. Tucker needs 5-minute warning. He'll be here. P-check will be here in a moment.
I don't think we need P-check. We told him just to be for that.
I P-checks testimony is great.
Yeah, we'll take it further. So.
I can send Tucker a
Oh,
note right now.
yeah, yeah.